Okay. Now, you all, we have incredible people, but as you know, and Linda's going to explain this, but you know that with the Parkland shootings, that we had a hero there, which was Scott, but even greater hero, which is his father, who's here, and his mom, Linda Beigel Schulman. I'm not going to say a whole lot because she's a powerful speaker and she's been leading a lot. I also understand that the report just came out like 2 days ago from that, and I think one also from Newton. Which is, we'll talk about that at some point. Come on, I'd like to introduce Linda Beigel Schulman. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Linda Beigel Schulman. I am not a politician. So understand that I will be speaking to you as the mother of Scott J. Beigel, my son. My 35-year-old son, whose 36th birthday would have been this past October 22nd. Scott was the teacher and cross-country coach who was gunned down and murdered on February 14th, 2018 at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. It has been 301 days since my son was shot 6 times within 3 seconds from less than 5 feet away by a 19-year-old with an AR-15 assault weapon, a weapon of war. On that day, Valentine's Day, Scott was teaching his last class of the day. The fire alarm went off, and his students, along with all of the other students in Building 12, were heading out of their classrooms towards the stairwells. This is customary for any fire drill. This is what they are taught to do when they hear the sound of a fire alarm. But this was no fire drill. The fire alarm was triggered by gunshot residue that came from an AR-15 assault rifle. So now picture this. As practiced time and time again, the students hear the fire alarm and immediately head to the closest exit of the building. Now, with everyone heading to the stairwell, trying to exit the building, gunshots are heard. Instead of immediately closing and locking his classroom door, Scott chose to go against protocol, and instead, he stood by his classroom door and began grabbing and summoning as many students as he could so as to get them back into his classroom, out of the hallway, and into a safe place. As he was trying then to close his classroom door to keep the students inside and safe, Scott was shot 6 times within 3 seconds from 5 feet away with an AR-15 assault rifle. Nothing can bring back my son. Scott was a teacher, a cross-country coach, a counselor, a grandson, a nephew, a cousin, a brother, an uncle, a son. My son will never come back to visit Dix Hills. My son will never see his sister or brother-in-law, niece, and nephews. My son will never see his grandmother or his uncle, his aunt or cousins. My son will never get married. My son will never have children of his own. Scott will never teach another class, coach another team, spend another summer at camp, or laugh with his friends. I will never have another chance to hug my son and tell him I love him. As I stand before you today, I am hoping that we can make something positive come out of this. I am here today to talk about reasonable gun control. This has become my mission in life since February 14th. I am here today because I believe as a community, a state, and country, we need to put aside our political philosophies and differences. I ask that people on the right and people on the left meet me in the middle. Meet me in the middle for the sake of all of our lives, the lives of our children, the lives of our loved ones, the lives of our friends, and the lives of our coworkers. Meet me in the middle. The middle is humanity. The middle is where humanity lives. The middle is the only place where compromise becomes democracy. We need to continue to have conversations about mental health so that all who need help will receive it. We need to take action so parents no longer feel a knot in the pit of their stomachs when they send their children to school each day. We need to take action so that our children will no longer walk into their schools with fear in their hearts, wondering where they may have to hide if an active shooter decides that their school will be next. We need to advocate so we can prevent another tragedy like the one in Parkland, or Pittsburgh, or Las Vegas, or Santa Fe, or Aurora, or Orlando. We need to advocate for reasonable gun control. We need to advocate for the enactment of the red flag law. The enacting of the red flag law in New York was held up by the Republican State Senate. The New York State Senate Republicans are compelled by the NRA and its money. The NRA does not want to see reasonable gun control legislation enacted anywhere. The NRA prefers to fan the flames of fear with the hope that people will buy more guns. And buy more guns they will, totally out of fear. Human lives should be more important than the contributions of the NRA. Now that we have a Democratic New York State Senate, we need to enact Governor Cuomo's red flag law here in New York. The red flag law will save lives. After the Parkland massacre in Florida, which is a very pro-gun state, they enacted the red flag law, and it has been used over 50 times. Maryland has enacted the red flag law, and it has been used over 130 times. The red flag law, which is also known as the Extreme Risk Protection Order, will allow teachers, law enforcement, and family members to petition the court to take away the guns of any individual who may be a danger to themselves or others. This is a reasonable and rational gun control measure which addresses the mental health issue directly. The law will save lives. Please write to your state assemblymen and state senators and tell them that you support the passage of the red flag law. There is another proposal in Albany for reasonable gun control legislation. It would require that prior to the delivery of any rifle or shotgun sold by a licensed dealer to any potential purchaser, the purchaser must agree to have his or her social media accounts reviewed by law enforcement. This legislation allows law enforcement to check the last 3 years of activity on Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, and Instagram of the potential buyer. This will save lives. You may ask, why is this important? In Parkland, under Florida law, as it existed prior to the massacre, the 19-year-old shooter was able to legally purchase that AR-15 military assault weapon. However, if the shooter's social media history would have been able to be reviewed, we know for a fact that law enforcement would have discovered that the shooter was in danger to himself as well as others. If this had been done, the shooter would have been denied the ability to buy that AR-15 assault rifle that murdered my son. Let me share with you a couple of examples of why I'm fighting so hard for reasonable gun control. Some states propose and enact legislation which must first be approved by the NRA. Iowa is one of those states. Just recently, the state of Iowa enacted legislation which allows a blind person to obtain a gun permit. That's right. A blind person can now obtain a gun permit in Iowa. Another NRA favorite is to arm teachers. I am 100% against arming teachers. Teachers are meant to teach. What happens when an active shooter goes into a school and there are 10 teachers armed with guns drawn? First responders arrive. Who do they shoot? How do you know who's the active shooter and who are the teachers? Would they shoot first and ask questions later? We have to assist law enforcement and help them prevent senseless gun violence. We have to assist law enforcement so as to help prevent guns from getting into the hands of people who are potentially in danger to themselves or danger to others. This past Saturday, my husband and I were flown down to Florida, where we received a briefing from David Bodrich, who's the Deputy Director of the FBI. Director Bodrich, the second in command at the FBI, has testified before Congress and briefed the President on February 16th, 2 days after the Parkland massacre. He was emphatic that the public must help by contacting local authorities or FBI and report anyone they truly suspect may use a firearm to harm themselves or to harm others. I say truly because of the ridiculous amount of crank calls that flood into law enforcement every day. I am not looking to ban all guns. We do all have a constitutional right to bear arms. I am fighting to save the lives of our children, grandchildren, husbands, wives, sisters, and brothers. I am fighting to save lives of our friends and coworkers. Banning assault weapons will save lives. Banning bump stocks will save lives. Limiting the number of rounds in a magazine to 10 will save lives. Universal background checks will save lives. Closing the gun show loophole will save lives. Passing and acting the red flag laws will save lives. Allowing law enforcement to research a potential gun buyer's social media posting will save lives. I am tired of politicians who offer only thoughts and prayers. Thoughts and prayers will not stop the killing of innocent lives. Thoughts and prayers do not save lives. Thoughts and prayers come from politicians who only talk the talk, and now we must make them walk the walk. We have the power to force the politicians to walk the walk, so let's do it. Let your elected officials know that you support reasonable gun control. Hold your elected officials accountable. After Columbine, some politicians offered only their thoughts and prayers and nothing more. This is not acceptable. Did those thoughts and prayers prevent the shooting in Las Vegas? No. Did those thoughts and prayers prevent the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando? No. Did those thoughts and prayers prevent the mass shootings in Aurora or Virginia Tech or Sandy Hook or Parkland or Santa Fe? No. How about Columbine or Pittsburgh or Charleston? How about just recently in a Chicago hospital or in Denver or in Thousand Oaks? Let us not forget that right here in our own backyard 25 years ago, we had the massacre on the Long Island Railroad. Please never say that it's just another mass shooting. There is no such thing as just another mass shooting. There have been 309 mass shootings in the United States in 2018 alone. 309 mass shootings. Just take a second and comprehend that number. 309 times someone with a gun, usually a military assault weapon like an AR-15, shot and killed innocent people. Those people were at schools, houses of worship, grocery stores, bars, movie theaters, and nightclubs. No place is immune. No one in Parkland, Aurora, Orlando, Santa Fe, Pittsburgh, Virginia Tech, Sandy Hook, or even on Long Island ever thought it would happen in their community, but it did. None of them will ever be the same. The mass shooting at Marjory Stoneman Douglas had thousands of victims. Scott and the other 16 who were murdered are not the only victims of senseless and preventable gun violence. So are their families and friends. So are the 17 who were shot by the gunman and survived, along with their families and friends. Have any of you ever heard of Anthony Burgess? Probably not. Anthony Burgess, this is the New Yorker magazine, okay, is a student at Marjory Stoneman Douglas who was shot and survived. He is a victim. This is Anthony Burgess today. with his multiple scars from bullets piercing his young 15-year-old body. Anthony has scars all over his body from his multiple surgeries. Not only scars, he must also carry a colostomy bag wherever he goes. Anthony Burgess is only 15 years old. Other victims are all of the teachers and staff at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School and their families and friends. So are all of the students who were in Building 12 that day that witnessed the carnage. And so are the first responders who put themselves in harm's way to protect the students, faculty, and staff at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. And so are their families and friends. Let me tell you about some of the first responders in Parkland. We were fortunate to have lunch with one of the first responder teams who entered Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School on that day. These first responders shared with us that they still, to this day, have nightmares. Following protocol, the first responders went into the school with their weapons locked and loaded. Then, in order to protect the students, they pointed their loaded weapons at the students and staff and yelled the words, "Hands up and don't look down. Hands up and don't look down." They shouted, "Don't look down," because they did not want any of the children to see the carnage that they would have to walk through, around and over, in order to get out of the building. The traumatic effect of the shooting continues today. Remember when I said earlier that the fire alarm went off at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School during the shooting? Well, know this. Every time the fire alarm goes off at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, the students and teachers relive the horrors of that day. Every time there is a bang or a loud noise, the students are afraid that there is another active shooter in their school. Is this the environment that encourages teaching or learning? Of course not. None of these people, nor anyone in Parkland, will ever be the same. The residents of Squirrel Hill, San Bernardino, Sandy Hook, Virginia Tech, Orlando, Las Vegas, and Santa Fe will never be the same. The point is that senseless and preventable gun violence has more victims than just those who were murdered. No parent should have to send their child to school with fear that they may not return home. No child should have to go to school in fear of being shot. No child should have to carry a bulletproof backpack. No child should have to walk into school thinking about where they should hide in case of an active shooter. No teacher should have to go through active shooter drills with their students. I did not celebrate Thanksgiving with Scott. I did not celebrate Hanukkah with Scott. I will not be calling Scott on New Year's Eve to wish him a Happy New Year. But I will celebrate the day reasonable gun control laws are enacted in New York. I will look up and make sure my son Scott knows how much I love him, how much I miss him, and that his murder, no matter how senseless, no matter how incomprehensible, it will save lives. Thank you for having me here today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. We will make a difference.